Thank you, Chris. I'm Ben Singer. I'm a condominium development lawyer. I work at Schneider Ruggiero Spencer Milburn. We help builders go from acquisition to disposition. We do almost everything in the middle, not so much with the construction disputes, but otherwise we're pretty much your go-to guys. So we're going to talk about missing middle condominiums, and we're going to talk about missing middle condominiums because they will help certain projects pencil. And I'll get into why in a bit, but first, I want to go over sort of our basic first principles. What is a condominium? So it's a type of property. It's not a type of building. We usually hear about, all the big condominiums going up in Toronto. We think of them as towers. That's not necessarily what they are. A condominium is a collection of at least two three-dimensional pieces of property. We call them units that are connected to common elements. Condominiums are a corporation, so they have their own independent legal personhood. They're governed by a board of directors, and the way condominiums work is that owners pay into a pool of costs. They pay their common expenses to maintain common areas and amenities. So everything from your basic building maintenance to paying for the pool if there is one. And what's important to remember is it's not towers are not the only kind of condominium. A condominium can take a lot of different physical structures. It can be part of a physical structure. One physical structure can have multiple condominiums. It can have a condominium and a freehold element. And a condominium can stretch across multiple structures. It doesn't have to be one single building. So, why condos? The first reason we might want to develop missing middle is as a condo is making it pencil. And the primary reason to develop as a condominium is to be able to pre-sell your units to individual, whether they are end users or investors who are then going to rent them out. Pre-selling units is extremely useful because it gives you access to deposits. So if you think about the normal capital stack for a rental development, you essentially have your money, you have your investor's money. That's your equity, and you have either a land loan and construction loan, or if you're working with Foremost, you have a single lender that you're working with. That's where your money is coming in from, and you won't see any actual revenue from an end user until your rent. So you are borrowing a larger sum of money, and money doesn't come in until much later. When you are working with pre-sold condominium units, you have deposits on hand. They can't be immediately accessed. There are certain rules around it and certain costs to it, but the cost of accessing those deposits is a lot less than your mortgage interest. It is going to decrease the amount that you actually have to borrow in order to build the exact same project with the same equity requirements. And it is going to essentially stretch your interest. So you're borrowing less, you have lower interest payments through the term of the loan, and you're also going to be able to pay that loan back sooner because you have an immediate plan for buyout rather than developing and either holding and paying, refinancing, paying interest as you go, or finding a buyer at the end of the day for the project as a whole and sort of paying out the loan at that point. There's another point on HST, which is that when you bring a rental project online, there's a deemed disposition to you of that rental project. It's a very silly legal fiction that the government uses to take your money. The advantage of having end buyers is that instead of being hit with an HST bill immediately on your first rental, so you've got, I don't know, you're renting out a unit for $3,000 a month, you get in $3,000, but your project is valued at $10 million, and so the government asks you for $1.3 million immediately on receipt of that $3,000. Doesn't seem quite fair. Once you sell, so you've registered your condo, you've actually disposed of it to an end buyer, that's when the HST becomes payable. It's the same amount of HST, but that end buyer is giving it to you to pay the government. You take out your ITCs, you pay it, you're done. That cash crunch doesn't exist. Now, there's a third element of making it pencil that didn't make it into the presentation, and that's because it is a little more controversial. And it's that when you are selling condominium units, or really any sale of pre-build, you can allocate risk to your buyers. So you may see in a builder contract a list of adjustments that the builder can charge. A great example of this is an adjustment for dewatering charges and dewatering costs. So you've got a site, you don't know what's going to happen when you start digging up the foundation, and all of a sudden, ton of water rushes into the site. It's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to get that out. In a rental situation, you have no one to allocate that risk to. In a sales situation, you can, if it's in your purchase agreement, allocate that to the buyer. Now, this is obviously not without its own cost, because in any sort of condominium situation, your buyer's getting a big contract, but they have 10 days in which to bring it to their lawyer and review. And their lawyer, if they are moderately competent, the first thing they're going to do is look at the list of adjustments and see what risks you've allocated to them. So on that front, it can make sales harder to allocate risk in that way. It can also harm the industry as a whole to be too aggressive on things like adjustments, because our reputation as builders of Toronto, as builders of a community, is really, it's general. What one builder does reflects on all of the rest of us. So being aggressive in this way can backfire as a whole and create distrust for the building community. So the second advantage for condominium structure is not necessarily so much to do with you as to do with the end users, because the end user of a rental product is a renter. They're not building equity in their own property. When you sell someone a condo unit, they can live in, it's exactly the same property, but they can use that to build their own equity. They're paying interest, but also equity to the bank, and they can get that out when they themselves go to sell. This is obviously not a very diversified portfolio if your one investment source is your home, but for a lot of people, the forced savings nature of owning a home and mortgaging it and sort of paying in, it is a way to build equity for the future, whether or not property values go up, because they need that. The other element of ownership is that when you are in a condo situation and the owners are paying into a reserve fund, necessary repairs that will happen, again, to the same building over time, instead of having a big cash crunch for the big owner of the building who hasn't set money aside, by law, the condo must do a reserve fund study, so analyze the structure of the building, have an engineer come and do a report, and then ensure that as part of the common expenses, the reserve fund is being funded, and it smooths out costs over time. So rather than necessarily being hit by a big bill for one big repair, money's been collected and it's available. The third advantage is a little more fun, I guess, and it's amenities. When you're dealing with a rental space, people are more likely to come and go, and amenities, so whether it's garden spaces or other shared spaces, are probably going to be more generic. When you're dealing with owners who are there for the long term, you can invest more in more specific and stylized amenities that the owners actually want to use and want to share the costs of. There are some downsides to doing a condo project. The first big downside is that the government mandates disclosure packages and budgets for, oh, I see a lot of people are taking a picture of this one slide. I think, Chris, everything's going to be distributed or available for sure. So the disclosure package does two things. One, it creates a big upfront cost. You're going to all of your consultants, including your lawyer, and having them draft up a disclosure package with a draft declaration, certain mandatory disclosure items, and a projected budget. This can then be used to go and sell the property, but from the date that the purchaser signs their agreement and gets their disclosure package, they have 10 days to review and say no. Now, say that's happened, and something happens to the development of the property, and there's got to be a change to what you do. that's going to restart your period. So where you thought you had certainty, that can create uncertainty. So that's why at the beginning of that period, you do need to spend the time, spend the energy and the money on the consultants who are going to give you essentially as certain a disclosure package as you can. The other element of the budget is that when you hand out the budget in the disclosure package, that's a guarantee. You're saying, if you're saying that the common expenses are going to be $200 a month in the first year, you are giving them a guarantee, and if they are higher than that, you're on the hook for the first year. You're also potentially on the hook for material misrepresentations. So if you miss a line item, a big line item in the budget, or you miss a big item in the disclosure, you've built the condo and it's starting to function. If something that you missed in the disclosure is wrong or is deemed to be a material misrepresentation, you can be on the hook for long-term diminution of value of the property. Second downside here is that we've just gone through a period of sort of revolution in approvals for missing middle product. You can build, now it's up to 5 units per lot as of right, your fourplex and your garden suite. Doing a condo introduces a level of approval, the draft plan of condominium approval. It's going to be required even when the site is site plan exempt. So you skipped your zoning, you skipped your site plan, you still have a draft plan of condo to deal with. So that's going to create at least some additional time, money, and municipal roadblocks. We don't know yet how the city is going to treat the draft plan of condo approval. If we go back in time a few months, the process was essentially draft plan of condo approval was fulfill all your site plan conditions. But now that there's no zoning, so no ability of the city to impose its will there's no site plan approval for these 10 units, they may get more serious. Downsides for owners, condo fees, everybody hates paying their condo fees. When you rent, you've got one line item, maybe you're paying hydro, your rent, your hydro, you're done. For owners, you pay your mortgage, you pay your realty taxes, you pay your garbage fees, and now you're adding on condo fees. So people hate it. Just in general, people hate paying their condo fees, but they're a necessary component. There's nothing you can do. A condo will have condo fees, but it is a potential downside. And then in the sort of broader sense of the building community, condominiumizing a building slows potential change. Even if the zoning is permissive, so say the zoning permits not just residential, but retail and small commercial. If you've locked into your condo declaration that all of the units are residential units, that cannot be changed without a vote of the owners, and at this scale, it's essentially a unanimous vote. If we're talking 4 or 5 owners, any one of them has a veto. So if you are thinking for the future, building a permissive declaration rather than a restrictive one might be what you want to do, but at the same time, a lot of people will only buy into a residential condominium if they know it's going to be a residential condominium. So it's something to keep in mind is that the choices that you make today will reflect in the condominium declaration 50, 60 years, basically until the building falls down. So some strategies and opportunities when it comes to condos. The first thing is to try to replicate scale as much as you can. This means trying to build the same project over and over and over again. It might be tempting to look and see different size lots in different areas of the city, different kinds of construction. The way to replicate scale in this space is to essentially pick 1 or 2 or 3 building types, 1 or 2 or 3 lot sizes, and to keep going. Because that way, not only your building plans scale, because you've made 1 or 2 or 3 sets, but your condo declaration will scale, your disclosure statement, your budget should all essentially be the same. So you can replicate the economies of scale that builders of 200 units have by building 200 units 50 times. You do want to maximize your as-of-right permissions. Now, it occurred to me after I sent that slide into Chris that point may actually be wrong. In theory, you have permission on any single lot to build a fourplex and a garden suite. If you built them next to each other, there's nothing necessarily stopping you from registering a condo plan over all 10 units. And in that way, sharing some of the budgeted costs, things like condo management, which can be extraordinarily expensive on a small scale, sharing that across. Now, the problem there is you can't necessarily do that as of right. We're going to see how the city treats this sort of thing, but even if it's four separate buildings, technically registering a condo plan over the two lots has the effect of combining them into one lot, and the city does not want to do that. So we'll see how they actually treat that if it is multiple separate buildings, or if they'll even permit sort of the merger, because if they've permitted the building type and they've permitted, if everything else is as of right, the idea that whether it's one or two lot, it shouldn't necessarily make a difference. Third opportunity is phased condominiums. Just like in point one, where we want to replicate scale, being able to add new units to the first condominium is a possibility. It's something that has to be disclosed in advance to your first set of buyers and every subsequent set of buyers. They have to know what they're getting themselves into. But essentially, you can build a fourplex and then register it as a condo, get your money out, build the next fourplex, register as part of the first condo, take your money out, and hopefully by that time you can build 2 fourplexes. Register that as part of that condo, get your money out. This can only happen on a 10-year timescale. And again, the important thing is this has to be planned from the beginning. It can't be a surprise for the original buyers. If the original buyers think they're buying into a single 4-unit townhome or 4-unit complex, you're locked in. The last strategy, opportunity, what to call it, is that there's a lot of opportunity here to educate consumers who never would have considered the condo as a way to buy a home and to live in this city in a more affordable way than trying to either save up for a single family or rent forever. Consumers do need to be educated about condo fees and reserve funds. The dollar amounts can be staggering, and making sure that they understand that what they're doing is taking future costs and setting them aside for sort of future use, to think of it less as an expense and more of almost a savings account for their own home, and a way of compelling their neighbors to use it as a savings account for their home. There's opportunity here to consult with your consumers, and rather than impose amenities or site-specific items on them, before you even go out to sale, to find interested parties and work with them to develop custom amenities. So you might find 4 gearheads who individually can't really afford the garage of their dreams. Together they could. You can build the home for them where they can share access to the same garage that they never could afford apart, and have a mechanism by which, rather than sort of everybody buying gear and storing it at Greg's house, and if somebody breaks it, we don't know who's responsible, we don't have a way to govern that. Having that built into their homeownership and part of the condo fees going to support that, that's a way to, I guess, build, it would be a more luxury experience, but build something that people actually want to use. And the last, I think, big opportunity is finding current homeowners who want to age in place and who either want to add the ability for family members to take on ownership interest in part of the property, or take on other family or close friends and add units in that way to make sure they're retaining at least part of their equity, part of their retirement as part of their property, but also adding new units for new people to join that neighborhood. So just to recap, we're not talking about just towers when we're talking about condos. The big item here is making it pencil, and to think about condos as an extra tool in the toolkit. It's not going to be appropriate for every project, but when you're thinking about your project at the inception stage, thinking of the condominium toolbox as one more useful item is, I think, a great way to make sure that we build more of this product that Toronto desperately needs. So my contact information is up there. Unfortunately, I've run out of cards. If anybody does want to talk to me after, you gotta actually take this picture. So thank you so much, Chris, for the opportunity to speak, and I guess we're going into Q&A.